Hi, Patrick. Thanks
Howdy,
for
y'all. Thank you for having me, my good sir.
Absolutely. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, howdy. My name is Patrick Ream. I work in the space business. My background is undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering from Texas A&M University, Gig'em. And right now I'm just working just in training. And I'm a huge space aficionado. I love space. I grew up, like one day wanting to be an astronaut, and thanks in part to this behemoth we have behind us right now, the Saturn V. I remember visiting this place when I was 7 years old, and I still have a photo to prove it. And knowing where I was back then and knowing where I am right now, it's pure catharsis. And honestly, so thankful to be here and so thankful to meet all the amazing people that I have so far and all the opportunities.
I also remember visiting this place when I was 7.
Dude.
But that was in the early 1980s.
So it was all in the open, right?
It was all in the open.
Yeah.
But also there's no Space Center Houston. And, JSC was an open campus. You would come and they would have all the exhibits scattered throughout the buildings.
Really?
And you would just walk around to each of the buildings.
Interesting.
And you would eat in the same cafeterias as the astronauts and then flight controllers and everybody else. And yeah,
that I can definitely tell how that can inspire someone. Wow. I guess it makes sense why we've stopped doing that just for security purposes, but also that's such a unique experience that is extremely impactful, especially for inspiring younger generations, younger kids, because I think being able, you grow up hearing about astronauts and flight controllers and all these things, and they become almost like mythical figures, right? Where essentially it's like you have to be like the best of the best. Like, oh my god, they're pretty much like they're not even real. But then being able to see them firsthand as a kid, it just brings it down to reality and kind of shows you that it's not this impossible thing. Yes, you too could do that one day, and I guess that's one thing we might be missing, and hopefully we can change that.
I mean, I think the Space Center Houston is great because we have everything together.
Yeah.
But at the same token, I don't know, there's something special about kind of being on the real thing.
Yeah, I agree completely, because it's like the difference between visiting a memorial or visiting a museum versus actually experiencing things firsthand, right? You can see the aftermath and the effects of it, but you don't get to experience the real-time emotions and the real-time reality of the situation, right? But I mean, that's why we're all here, right? To pursue our passions and to spread those passions to everyone else. And partially one of the reasons why you're doing this as well, which is why I'm so happy that you're doing this.
I'm happy that you're willing to participate.
Yeah, of course.
So at 7, you came here.
Yeah.
Do you remember having any space memories or desires before that? I mean,
yeah.
Were you dragged here and then got excited, or were you excited and they let you come here?
So I lived in San Antonio back then, and we didn't come from a lot of means, which meant that so I already had been drawn to space before. I read this big book of space, right? That's what it was called, and these other magazines and stuff. So I'd just been ravenously devouring space stuff, right? And then one day my dad just comments, "Oh, the Johnson Space Center, it's in Houston here in Texas." And I was like, "What? We have to go. We have to." And so I would just beg them all the time, take us to the Johnson Space Center. I have to see it. I have to see it. I have to see it. Because the way NASA presents it, it's look at this thing. Jesus Christ. This is, I think to this day, the greatest accomplishment in human history. This. Landing on the moon, right? And so, since we didn't come from a lot of means, it took a lot of begging, and eventually until my parents were able to not only afford to be able to take us here, but also be able to take the time off from work, right? And so I think we made it a day trip or whatever, and it was amazing. It was all I thought it would be and better. Because it's like I said before, there's a difference between seeing photos of it, seeing things in a museum, and seeing the thing in person, right? Even having this, I just can't fathom how huge this bad boy is, and all of this just to land men on the moon and return them safe, right? With 1960s technology, like it's incredible. Like it's incredible, and that really was, I think, a pivotal experience in my childhood, really formative, and honestly, like really cemented in my head that like space was something I really wanted to pursue, even though I didn't really have a good concept of what pursuing it meant at 7 years old, as you might imagine. But you know, I'm very, very thankful and fortunate to have had that experience.
And now Apollo 17, the last banner you can see here, 1972, 50 years ago, was the last time anybody was on the moon.
Yeah.
Can you believe it's been so long?
I honestly can't, and at the same time, I sort of can, just because I think, like once giant accomplishments and achievements become the norm, people lose interest. If that makes sense. And so, like people's attention span, I would say, are kind of like goldfish, right? In a sense, because like, okay, the first time when we landed on the moon, right? Like we had like what, 500 million, or if not 1 billion people worldwide watching it, worldwide. Like that's the sort of thing that space does. It brings together the entire world. But then after that, there was drop off and drop off and drop off from, you know, TV audiences around the world, because like, you know, it's even something like landing on the moon becomes the norm, right? Yeah. And so after that, you lose the political willpower to continue to fund these missions, which is unfortunate because, you know, all of the technology and resources that we got from developing these systems, we're still like doing great things with them, and a lot of our society is built on that, you know. And so I can't. I'm thankful that now we are kind of restarting and reigniting the passion that the public has for space and stuff. But I wish, you know, all of this development had begun happening 50 years sooner with the same amount of capital and funding. But, you know, I think it's always better late than never, right? And like, who knows what the future has in store, right?
And so, when did you find out that we were planning to go back to the moon?
Ooh, okay. I found out with Constellation with George W. Bush. I believe when I visited Johnson Space Center, I remember they still had like a mock-up of what looked like the SLS, and like obviously it's different now. It wasn't actually the SLS. The SLS is a brand new thing, and I remember the first thing I thought was like, why can't we just take the space shuttle to the moon? Like, this is so, it doesn't even look as cool as a space shuttle. Let's go ahead. Obviously, I was 7 years old. Like, it's kind of nonsensical fact. But, and I was like, wow, like, I can't wait. They were talking about, like, yeah, by the end of the decade, you know, like, yeah, like, men back on the moon. I was like, heck yeah, and then it never happened. And then Constellation gets canceled, Space Shuttle gets canceled, so many programs get canceled, and it seems like, I think the early 2010s were like the bleakest, had the bleakest outlook in terms of NASA pursuing space development, if that makes sense. But now with, you know, Artemis and SLS and, you know, the real like an actual concrete date with a rocket on the pad, like just waiting to go for launching Artemis 1, I think just really brings it all together, and really just turns that into a reality, because at this point that rocket's going to go up regardless, right? Whether or not it's going to be successful doesn't matter, because it's going to go up, and its destination and trajectory is, of course, going to be the moon, right? So I can't wait for us to go back. I think it's going to be phenomenal, and frankly, like, it's going to be, I think, a really big inflection point for the space industry as a whole, because like that's going to be the moment where people realize like damn, like space is something I want to do, and space is something that I think is pivotal for our future as a species.
So whenever you think about the future of humanity, like 200 years, what does it look like to you?
I personally want it to look like pretty much an interstellar species, where essentially, like, I know I kind of said earlier, oh, people have the attention spans of goldfish and stuff, but like in a sense, I also want that to happen with space and spaceflight. I want spaceflight to become so common that we view it like we view flying on airplanes, right? Where it's just like, oh, okay, I have to catch the 3 o'clock rocket or whatever it is we decide, whatever vehicle we decide to launch things into space with, right? To go to Mars or any other habitable or pseudo-habitable planetary body, right? Whether it's Europa, Titan, whatever, right? And so that's what I project it's going to look like, and I think it's going to be driven primarily by the commercial and private sector, with eventually NASA and other governmental entities doing what they've always done with other emerging technologies like this, turning into more of a regulatory role, and letting the commercial sector, take the brunt of the risk, letting them make the big decisions, the big challenges, making those big technological advancements to the point where eventually, we're going to be looking back on this baby, this behemoth, and think like, wow, we actually like people were able to go into space with that. Like in 200 years, this is probably going to look like a horse and buggy. Like how a horse and buggy looks like to us right now, right? And that's the future I envision, and that's the future I want, and that's the future I personally have pledged to myself at doing everything I possibly can to make happen.
Do you think we'll have settlements on Mars in 200 years?
I think so. I definitely think so. I think there is definitely the will to do so, and and eventually, once technology reaches the point where it is feasible, even mining is gonna drive us to settle those places, because thanks to capitalism, if there's ever a way to make money on something, you will find people willing to try to make money off of it, right? And will we create a settlement within our lifetimes, like Elon Musk said? Who knows? But I personally think that is not a possibility, but an inevitability.
That's awesome. Okay, if you could, would you take a trip to space?
Yes, without a doubt.
How far would you go? Just to orbit, to the moon? Would you immigrate to Mars?
Ooh, well that's okay, because I wouldn't permanently stay on Mars, to be honest, because I still like the quality of life we have here on Earth, if that makes sense. Although visiting Mars would be amazing. I think that would be a purely my brain probably wouldn't be able to function. It just, because nobody is born, at least in our generation, nobody's born with the idea oh yeah, one day I'm gonna be on Mars, right? No. I bet you Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin weren't born being yeah, I'm gonna step on the moon one day. No. It's these ideas that are so, extraordinary that they're almost impossible to conceptualize, right? And so I would love to visit Mars. Would I stay there? No, because I think Earth is a pretty darn cool planet, and I 100% agree with Jeff Bezos. I think Earth is the best planet, because it's the only one that we know of so far that actually has life. I mean, not only life, but intelligent life. So I love this planet, and this is where I've made all my memories as well. All my friends and family are, and while Mars is cool, it's not where my family is, unfortunately.
Well, to that point, we kind of looked at from now at 200 years from now, which is 22.
Yeah.
So imagine you or one of your descendants actually does immigrate to Mars.
Yeah.
It's 200 years in the future.
Yeah.
And it's your great granddaughter. Yeah. She's in high school on Mars, lived on Mars her entire life. She's in history class, and we might do a project on the 1820s.
Yeah.
She's writing a paper on the 2020s.
Yeah.
So what do you think she should write about this decade?
Ooh, well, I will say, at least in terms of space flight, I will say if she's going to write about this decade, or when she writes about this decade, she needs to start in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, and talking about the X Prize. I definitely think Peter Diamandis did a lot of great work and effort in inspiring people to kind of pursue commercial spaceflight as an actual thing, with Virgin Galactic, or back then I think it was just still scaled, being the first, scaled composites being the first commercial company to go to space twice in the span, I think 2 weeks. I think that's what really kicked off everything. And also another book, or not another book, a book called The Case for Mars, released and written by Robert Zubrin, which many people don't know, but was a huge inspiration for Elon Musk in his goal to eventually colonize Mars, right? So without the 90s and the work of all the passionate people from that era, we wouldn't have all the huge advancements that we see today. We wouldn't have Blue Origin, we wouldn't have SpaceX, we wouldn't have, frankly, Rocket Lab. We wouldn't, like, even these brand new launch services, and not even launch services, but satellite builders wouldn't exist because it all hinges on people having a dream and having the passion and wherewithal and willpower to pursue that, right? And so after, she gives context to that, you better, she would be talking about, how people are building on what the predecessors did, right? So building on okay, so Jeff Bezos, his big thing, and I think Blue Origin trademarked this, is building the road to space, right? Exactly. And so, like, the point of building a road to space is so that, the difficult part is laying down the asphalt, laying down the gravel and everything, and then the easy part is driving over it. A lot of commercialization happened because of the highway system, right? And that's the same vision Jeff Bezos and a lot of other people have for space development, right? So after they've built the road for space, it's going to become a lot easier to do commercial space business, right? Small satellite services, whether it's launching them, whether it's deploying them, whether it's servicing them, like Orbit Fab or anything like that. Axiom Space, they just recently, as of like 2 weeks ago, opened their brand new facility at an airfield, Bigelow Aerospace, they're also doing a lot with hotels in space. So it's just, all of these seeds that have been sown decades ago are finally coming to fruition, and all of these other companies are going to pop up to support that, right? And to take advantage of that infrastructure that's already been built. So I think that's what's going to be defining the 2020s, and frankly, that's kind of why, like, I'm very hell-bent on starting my own commercial space company one day, because I want to be a part of that. I think space is humanity's future, and pivotal part of that is to inspire people, and best way to inspire people is by having people do things, and like landing on the moon, right?
Absolutely. Well, Patrick, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
thank you so much for participating in my project.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.